In 2024, I made 3 predictions the entire world said were impossible. I said Trump would win. I said he would start a war with Iran. And I said America would lose that war. All 3 came true. Now I have 8 new predictions. But before I give them to you, I want you to understand something. Most people look at the world the way you watch a movie. They follow the characters, they react to the drama, they pick sides, but they never stop to ask the single most important question. Who wrote the script? Because what is happening in the world right now is not chaos. It is not confusion. It is not a series of accidents. It is a plan. And the moment you understand the plan, the predictions stop being shocking. They become obvious. So let us begin. My first prediction is that China will take Taiwan, but not through war, through a deal. And America will be the one who arranges it. Taiwan is not just an island of 23 million people. It is the most important semiconductor manufacturing hub on the planet. TSMC produces over 90% of the world's most advanced chips, the chips inside your phone, inside every AI processor running right now, inside every advanced weapon system America builds and sells. So why would America ever give this up? Here's where most people are completely wrong. Taiwan is not America's asset. Taiwan is America's liability. Because if China tomorrow decided to simply blockade Taiwan, not invade, not a single missile fired, just blockade, the global semiconductor supply chain collapses overnight, and so does everything else. The question is not whether America can afford to lose Taiwan. The question is whether America can afford to leave Taiwan in permanent vulnerability forever. And that is a question America has already quietly answered. TSMC is already building factories in Arizona. $65 billion committed to American soil. This takes 10, maybe 15 years. So what America actually needs is not Taiwan forever. America needs Taiwan stable for the next decade while it quietly transfers the capability home. Once that transfer is complete, Taiwan becomes negotiable. America tells China it supports peaceful unification. China commits to 20 years of no military action. And by the time unification happens, America has already extracted the only thing that made Taiwan worth protecting. You will say, what about the Taiwanese people? What about democracy? And I understand that instinct, but nations do not act on morality. They act on interest. America gets its chips, China gets its island, and the Taiwanese get a Hong Kong arrangement for however long that lasts. Within 2 years, an American official close to Trump, not Trump himself, will publicly state that the United States supports peaceful unification. The media will call it a betrayal. But if you understand the game, you will see it for exactly what it is. My second prediction is that Trump will serve a 3rd term. Constitutionally impossible, you will say. But I want you to stop and think carefully, because there is a difference between something being unconventional and something being impossible. And when you read the Constitution very carefully, you will find that the gaps exist. The first path is this. Trump runs Don Jr. in 2028 and positions himself as vice president. Don Jr. wins. Don Jr. steps aside. Trump returns to the presidency. No rational person does this, but that has never been the standard we apply to Trump. The second path is more serious. By 2028, America is not just at war with Iran, it is at war with everyone. And a president at war carries emergency powers that allow things which would otherwise be unthinkable, including the suspension of elections. Zelensky did it in Ukraine, and nobody stopped him. So ask yourself this. If America is in the middle of a world war in 2028 and Trump declares a national emergency, who exactly stops him? The courts? The same Supreme Court where he appointed 3 of 9 justices? Think about that carefully, because the people laughing at this prediction today are the same people who laughed when I said Trump would win in 2024. We all know how that ended. My third prediction is that Iran becomes a forever war and America brings back the draft. Most people completely misread what this war is actually about. They say nuclear weapons, they say Israel, they say terrorism. And while all of those things play a role, none of them is the real reason. The real reason is the petrodollar. America's entire empire rests on one thing: the world using the US dollar to buy and sell energy. The moment that stops, the American empire ends. And Iran, connected to Russia and China, was threatening exactly that. So America had no choice but to act. But here's the problem. This war cannot end quickly because Iran is not Iraq. Iraq was flat desert. You fly in, you cut the head off the snake, and in 2 weeks, it is over. Iran is a mountain fortress. 92 million people. 31 decentralized military provinces, each with their own command and control. You cannot decapitate this snake because this snake has 31 heads. And so the war drags on. And to fight a war that drags on for years, possibly decades, you need soldiers, many of them. This is why, starting this December, every male between the ages of 18 and 24 in America will be automatically registered for the draft, not voluntarily. This law has already been passed. Most people do not know about it, but it is real, and it means an entire generation of young Americans is about to be told that their lives are no longer entirely their own. Think about what that does to a society. Think about what that does to families. Think about what that does to the political stability of a country that is already more divided than at any point in living memory. My fourth prediction is that Germany breaks before it fights. The plan, the stated plan, is for German troops to be on the ground in Ukraine by 2029. That is not rumor. That is the official direction of European military policy. But those troops never leave Germany. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Europe sanctioned Russian energy. That decision had a consequence nobody wanted to say out loud. Germany had been running its entire economy on cheap Russian gas. When that gas disappeared, Germany was forced to buy American LNG at a 50% markup overnight. Factories closed, companies relocated. The economic decline in Germany has been steeper than France, steeper than Italy, steeper than Britain. The German people feel this every month when the bills arrive, and when people feel pain like that, politics moves. The AfD party that opposes the war and opposes the immigration pressure that has simultaneously stretched Germany's social fabric is surging in the polls. If genuinely free elections were held in Germany today, they win. The establishment in Berlin knows this, Brussels knows this, and yet the response has not been to slow down. Germany is accelerating its militarization. More spending, more commitment, troops in Ukraine by 2029. Putin understands exactly what this means. So he does not need to defeat Germany militarily. He just needs to drag the war out long enough for the pain to do his work for him. Because his endgame is not the military conquest of Germany, it is the political realignment of Germany. What most people fail to understand is that the future of Europe may not ultimately be decided on the battlefields of eastern Ukraine, but inside the homes, minds, and economic realities of ordinary Germans. The real fracture line of this conflict runs directly through Germany itself. As energy prices rise, industries weaken, inflation pressures households, and political frustration grows, a slow transformation is taking shape within German society. Over time, the pressure of economic exhaustion could produce a political movement powerful enough to challenge the entire strategic direction of Europe. Eventually, a Germany may emerge that no longer sees endless confrontation with Moscow as sustainable, and instead chooses to pursue a new relationship with Russia built on energy, trade, and security realism. If that happens, the geopolitical structure that has defined Europe since the Cold War could begin to unravel from within. Most people are not watching this internal struggle carefully enough, but it may become one of the defining political shifts of the century. My fifth prediction is that the world moves steadily toward a fully integrated AI-driven civilian state. This phrase is often repeated casually, but very few people truly grasp the magnitude of what it means. The combination of digital identification systems and programmable digital currency creates something unprecedented in human history. The ability for governments to exercise total real-time control over the economic and social behavior of entire populations. Today, if authorities want to stop citizens from doing something, they must pass legislation, allocate enforcement resources, build legal cases, and physically intervene. That process is slow, imperfect, and constrained by institutions. But in a future dominated by digital currency, those barriers disappear. Financial access itself becomes conditional. A transaction can simply be denied automatically because an algorithm determines the purchase violates a policy, a regulation, or even a behavioral standard. No courtroom, no police officer, no public debate. Just silent, automated enforcement executed instantly through code. When digital currency is merged with universal digital identity systems, the scale of surveillance becomes almost limitless. Every purchase, every journey, every online interaction, every social connection, and every behavioral pattern can be collected into centralized databases and analyzed continuously by artificial intelligence. The purpose is not merely to monitor behavior after it occurs, but to predict behavior before it happens. Governments and institutions would possess the capability to identify dissidents, isolate undesirable activity, reward compliance, and restrict opposition with extraordinary precision. In many ways, elements of this system already exist in parts of the world today, particularly in China, where digital monitoring and state-managed technological oversight have advanced rapidly. What is most significant, however, is that Western governments increasingly appear less alarmed by these models and more interested in adapting similar mechanisms for their own societies under the language of security, efficiency, anti-fraud systems, and public safety. My sixth prediction is that Israel ultimately succeeds in establishing overwhelming regional dominance across the Middle East, achieving what many observers associate with the long-discussed concept of a greater Israel strategy. This is an uncomfortable subject for many people because it touches on religion, history, nationalism, and identity. But the geopolitical realities deserve serious examination regardless of emotion. The idea itself is rooted in interpretations of biblical territory extending from the Nile to the Euphrates. Whether one views that concept as symbolic, ideological, or strategic, the undeniable reality is that Israel is systematically removing or weakening nearly every major military force in the region capable of challenging its supremacy. Over the course of recent conflicts, Hezbollah has suffered major degradation. Hamas has been devastated militarily. Syria has been shattered by years of war and instability. And Iran now faces mounting direct military and economic pressure. As these obstacles diminish, the regional balance of power increasingly tilts toward Israel. The only remaining powers with the demographic, economic, or military potential to counterbalance Israeli dominance are Turkey and Saudi Arabia. Yet tensions with Turkey are already escalating publicly, while Saudi Arabia continues balancing between regional influence, economic modernization, and strategic caution. Israel understands something crucial. The long-term American military presence in the Middle East is unlikely to remain permanent. Washington's strategic focus is gradually shifting toward Asia and competition with China. Once that transition accelerates, the regional order will no longer rest on American enforcement, but on whichever local power has positioned itself most effectively before the withdrawal is complete. From this perspective, every additional month of regional conflict removes another strategic barrier and further reshapes the Middle East in Israel's favor. My seventh prediction is that NATO and Russia eventually move toward direct confrontation over Odessa. Russia's objectives in Ukraine were never solely about occupying territory for its own sake. The strategic goal has always centered on securing the Donbas region, protecting the land corridor to Crimea, and ultimately gaining control over Odessa. Odessa is not merely another city, it is Ukraine's gateway to the Black Sea. Whoever controls Odessa controls Ukraine's maritime access, its grain export infrastructure, and a significant portion of its economic future. If Odessa falls under Russian control, Ukraine effectively becomes landlocked and loses much of its strategic value as an independent regional power. NATO understands this reality perfectly well. For NATO, the issue is not only about defending Ukraine itself, but about preserving credibility. If Russia achieves its primary strategic objectives despite years of sanctions, military aid, intelligence support, and diplomatic pressure from the West, then NATO's image of deterrence suffers catastrophic damage globally. Countries around the world would begin questioning whether Western security guarantees truly carry weight against determined adversaries. That is why Odessa represents something far larger than geography. It symbolizes the credibility of the Western alliance system itself. And when great powers begin fighting over credibility rather than territory, the danger escalates dramatically, because neither side believes it can afford to back down. History repeatedly shows that wars become most dangerous when political prestige and strategic reputation are placed on the line. My eighth prediction is that Eastasia eventually descends into open geopolitical confrontation, driven by three separate but interconnected flashpoints, each operating according to its own strategic logic. The first is Taiwan. Japan has already made it increasingly clear that Taiwan is directly tied to Japanese national security. This is not simply ideological support for democracy or alliance politics with the United States. It is rooted in survival. Japan is an industrial superpower with extremely limited natural resources. Its economy depends entirely on secure maritime trade routes. If China gains control over Taiwan and extends dominance deeper into surrounding sea lanes, Japan risks losing reliable access to critical shipping routes through the Strait of Malacca and nearby maritime corridors. A disruption of those routes would cripple Japanese energy imports and industrial capacity. From Tokyo's perspective, allowing Taiwan to fall uncontested may eventually threaten Japan's own economic survival. The second flashpoint is the Strait of Malacca itself, one of the most strategically important waterways on Earth. Nearly all of China's imported energy flows through this narrow maritime corridor. China understands that any hostile power capable of blocking or controlling the strait could severely damage the Chinese economy within a relatively short period of time. The United States understands this vulnerability equally well, which is why American naval strategy increasingly emphasizes presence, partnerships, and logistical positioning across the Indo-Pacific region. Both sides recognize the same strategic truth, and because they recognize it simultaneously, the competition intensifies. Naval deployments, military exercises, alliances, and infrastructure projects are all part of a larger contest over who ultimately controls the arteries of global trade and energy movement. The third, and perhaps